Okay, today we're jumping into one of the absolute biggest questions of our time, and we're going to do it by looking at some really fascinating ecological research. So let's just get right into it. It seems like a pretty simple question, doesn't it? But wow, the answer is one of the most complex and honestly most urgent puzzles in all of science. I mean, the future of life on Earth really hinges on whether species are going to move, adapt, or just disappear. And look, this isn't just some academic thought experiment, right? The health of our entire planet's ecosystems is hanging in the balance. For decades, scientists have been leaning on one main tool to try and see into the future. For a long time, the go-to tool has been what's called a species distribution model. The idea is actually pretty straightforward. You look at where a species is living right now, you figure out the exact climate conditions at that spot, and then you use that info to map out all the other places on Earth that have a similar climate, places where that species could live. But, and this is a big but, here's the problem. While these models are definitely useful, they have some massive blind spots. They're only giving us part of the story. And when the stakes are this high, an incomplete story can be a pretty dangerous thing. And this is where the research really just gets right to the point. These models are missing three of the most fundamental ingredients of life itself. Demography, which is how populations grow and shrink, evolution, their ability to adapt, and biotic interactions, that whole complex dance between predators and prey. This really lays it all out, doesn't it? The old models, they see a static picture, just climate and location. But what they're missing is the messy, dynamic reality. The fact that species evolve, that they compete with each other, and that their populations are always changing. Turns out, life is a whole lot more complicated than just a map. So the real kicker is this huge assumption that's baked right into the old models. Scientists call it niche conservatism. Basically, it's the idea that what a species needs to survive, its perfect temperature, the right amount of rain, all that stuff, is basically set in stone forever. And that's the question that changes everything. What if that core assumption is just plain wrong? Life isn't static, it's constantly adapting. And if we're ignoring evolution, well, we're kind of missing the whole point. So this leads us to a much more powerful and frankly more realistic approach, one that finally brings the two most important pieces of this puzzle together. The paper we're looking at calls this an emerging synthetic discipline known as evolutionary community ecology. It's a bit of a mouthful, but the idea is simple. It's not just about where a species could live based on the weather. It's about understanding how it actually survives and changes inside a living, breathing, evolving community of other species. So how does it actually work? Well, it plugs the exact holes we were just talking about. First, it acknowledges that species can and do evolve. Second, it accounts for that incredibly complex web of interactions. Who eats who competes with who. And third, it tracks the real-world booms and busts of population changes over time. The secret ingredient here is understanding what are called complex feedbacks. Think of it like this. It's a constant loop. A new predator shows up, which forces its prey to evolve to get faster. But that change then ripples out and affects the entire food web for everyone else. So ecology is driving evolution, and that evolution is then reshaping the ecology. You really can't pull them apart. So what do we get for all this extra work and complexity? Well, we get a much sharper and more reliable look into our future. And here's the bottom line. Now, this chart is just for illustration, but it perfectly captures the message from the research. When we use those old static models, our ability to predict what happens is, well, it's limited. But the moment we bring in the dynamic forces of evolution and ecology, our ability to make realistic predictions gets a serious upgrade. This is really the ultimate goal. Better ecological forecasting. It's kind of like the difference between a weather forecast that only uses today's temperature versus one that uses air pressure, wind patterns, and ocean currents. One is basically a guess, the other is science. We need to be doing the same for biology. But as the paper makes really clear, this journey is definitely not over. This new integrated approach is a scientific frontier, and like any frontier, it has its own set of pretty big challenges. The researchers point out that there are still major caveats, big gaps in what we know. Just gathering all this different data, we're talking genetic data, population data, interaction data, and then getting it all to play nicely together is a huge technical hurdle. So the work to really sharpen these models and get all the information we need, it's really just getting started. And that really leaves us with one final and pretty urgent thought. We know the old ways of predicting the future just aren't good enough anymore. We have the blueprint for a much better way, but it means we have to understand the incredibly complex rules of life on a much deeper level. And the real question is,